Hi, I'm Martin from Glens Bushcraft, and today I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to keep your leather hiking boots in tip-top condition. So I know there'll be a lot of you out there in the hiking community, but also the bushcraft community, that have a lot of leather items. And one of the hardest used leather items that we own is the leather boot, leather hiking boot. Now these boots here are fully made of leather, obviously apart from the sole and the Gore-Tex liners, but this leather on the outside enables boots to be waterproof, supple and flexible while providing really good support for your ankles and protecting your feet from sharp things like rocks and thorns. Now the only downside to natural leather is that it does need to be taken care of, or it will dry up, it will crack, and you'll ruin your boots in no time if you don't take care of them. Now in terms of the boots I've got here, these are Mendel Dover Extremes. I've been using these boots for over 10 years now. This pair is a relatively new pair. The last pair lasted me for 6 years. Now as far as I'm concerned, there's two ways you can go with leather hiking boots. There's the old school variety of boots, like the Scarpas, that are made of super thick leather. They're really uncomfortable and they're quite difficult to wear in, but they will last for a long time, so they're made of really thick leather. And on the other side of things, there are the lighter weight boots that perhaps are not made from such thick materials, but your feet will be very comfortable. They'll be lightweight, they'll be flexible, and they'll give you some great usage out of them, but they might not last just as long. Now I think these Mendels fall into that category. They are extremely comfortable, there's a very minimal wear-in time, but they will wear out much faster if you don't take care of the leather. Now what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through a process that I use to take care of my leather boots and other leather items that really helps maintain and extend the life of these things. Now one of the important things about keeping your boots in good condition is actually washing them when they get home. It doesn't have to be a really thorough wash, although the more thorough the better. So it's not a secret that Scotland is a fairly wet and boggy place to go camping and hiking. A lot of the water in those bogs is very acidic, and this tends to eat away at not only the leather parts of your boot, but also the steel parts of your boot, i.e. like the eyelets and buttonholes and things like that. So we need to give them a wash when we go home with some fresh water. And obviously if you go anywhere near salt water, you want to get that off as quickly as possible as well, because these waters are corrosive to your leather and the other items on the boot. So you want to give them a wash, and I like to just use my brush as well, brush away any pieces of dirt, mud or anything like that. This is a gentle way of removing that. It's not too harsh, and it allows the little bristles to get in amongst all these little complicated folds and laces. It's a really good way of cleaning things. What you want to do then is leave them to dry, air dry. You don't want to put them near any harsh sources of heat. One of the worst things you can do for your leather boots is to take them and sit them on top of a radiator to dry. That is going to knacker your leather super fast, and it's even worse with stronger sources of heat like wood burning stoves and open fires. Wrong. Wrong. Now one of the things I actually do recommend you getting is a boot dryer. Now this was an absolute game changer for me to get one of these, and it just makes drying out your boots super easy, and you don't have to worry about destroying your boots in the process. You just gently push warm air directly into the toe or the heel of your boot, and that circulates through there and dries them from the inside out. It's a very efficient way of drying your boots, and it's also a very gentle way of drying your boots. I think they were originally invented for ski boots, but they work just as well for hiking boots and work boots. But what I like to do is I like to treat the boots just as they're about to be touch dry. Now you don't want to treat your boots when they're absolutely bone dry. That's a really bad condition for the leather to get into, and it will mean that the pores in the leather are much tighter, much more contracted, so they won't absorb your treatment. So what I like to do is, once they're washed, I leave them to air dry for a little while, not too long, maybe only 10-15 minutes, and once they are, I would say 90% dry, that's when you want to put your wax on. Now, let's talk about waxes. So what I've got here in front of me is just ones that I had handy at the time. Now these are waxes, or dubbings sometimes they're called. They're a hard wax that is solid at room temperature. You have to warm it up with your fingers and then rub it on. Now this is great, and it's a very good way of keeping your boots in good condition, keeping them hydrated, keeping the leather hopefully supple and well nourished, but they don't get absorbed as well as you would think into the leather, especially when they're bone dry. What you want to do is leave your boots until they're 90% dry, then put on your wax, and then you want to heat your boots very gently. I've already warned about the problems of heating your boots too much, but if you do it in a very controlled way, it can be very useful. Now the source of heat that I would use to melt my wax in is a hairdryer. That's the only one that I would recommend because it's the easiest one to control. There's different settings on it. You can make sure that you're not doing it too close or too far. You get a lot of control over it. And I would encourage you to use the middle setting. Don't use the hottest setting and don't put it straight next to it. You want to do it very, very gently, just enough to see the wax being absorbed into the leather. So these boots are going to need to be waxed. So to get a really, really good result, what I would do is take these laces off. Now once the laces are off, this allows me to open up these edges here and get right in and around the tongue. You want to get your wax down into these places where water is going to sit and it's possibly going to penetrate even more. Now a lot of these areas around about the tongue are going to be the thinnest parts of leather, so you really want to pay very close attention to these, because these are the ones that are going to flex a lot as you're opening and shutting them, and they're going to be under increased pressure of leaking. Now I like to use gloves to apply my wax. That's just because wax is particularly difficult to get off of your hands afterwards, and it saves me having to scrub my hands and make a mess of my hands. So I just use these gloves. Now I reuse these gloves. I mean, a pair of these thick, nitrile gloves will last me for years of doing this. I usually keep them in the same bag as I do my leather treatments. You can see the leather starting to change colour as the wax goes on. It is absorbing some of that wax just through the application and by me rubbing it in, but you'll see it will absorb even more as I apply a very, very gentle controlled heat from the hairdryer onto it. I'm going to make sure I get it everywhere, as many different nooks and crannies as I can, especially into these little tiny gaps in here, these little tiny corners where there's tight stitching and the leather is quite thin. I'm going to put plenty of wax in there. Make sure it really penetrates everywhere. The more often you do this, the better. But I find, even under heavy usage, doing this once every couple of weeks is usually enough. Now I'll tell you comparatively how much this benefits the boots. These boots are not cheap, so you don't want to be replacing them so often. I've got a friend of mine who bought the same boots, and at the time he was doing the same job, which involved spending a lot of time out in the hill, a lot of time walking large distances in rough terrain, boggy conditions. I was cleaning and waxing my boots like this, taking good care of them. Mine lasted 8 years. His lasted 6 months. That's the difference. And I also believe he was drying them on the radiator as well. So it's pretty much as bad as you can get. And for a 200 or sometimes even 300 pounds set of boots, that is pretty wasteful in my book. You buy good quality gear, you take care of it, it takes care of you. Okay, so that's not a bad coverage. Now let's just put the wax to the side, and I'll try and show you what I mean about the wax being absorbed. I'll try and get it really close in. I'll show you this slightly further away just now, and then I'll go closer in and show you. And this is the very first setting. You can see just as the wax is starting to go liquid, now it's starting to dry up. You can see that. I'm not doing it anymore. As soon as I see the leather suck in the wax, I'm taking the heat off. Now that side's practically done now. You can see how it's gone matte. Do the toe now. It's looking shiny, and now you see it's going matte as the wax is being absorbed. I don't want to overheat it, just enough. Now I'd maybe do this process 2 or 3 times, and 2 or 3 times is usually enough for the leather to be pretty much saturated with your treatment, and it's not going to be absorbing anymore. Now this is going to keep the leather in great condition, it's going to keep your feet dry. Now this may slightly affect the breathability of the boots, But to be honest, if you're going to be walking in very, very harsh conditions, you're going to want them to be waterproof, and breathability is a second sort of luxury feature of the boots. To be honest, I wax my boots very heavily like this, and I've never had a problem with wet feet from sweat. So once those layers of wax have been absorbed into the leather, that means that I can give it a final coat and put the laces back on, and they are ready for some more wear and tear in the harshest of environments. Now, of course, this process works with leather hiking boots. It also works with leather shoes, leather sheaths, and leather belts. And if you do that with all these items, the leather will stay supple, will stay hydrated, and will last a lot longer. So there you go, that's how I take care of my leather boots. If you follow this, you get many, many years more wear out of your boots and in great condition. So I'm Martin from Glens, and see you next time. Please like and subscribe, as I'll be releasing videos regularly and you won't want to miss them. And also like our Facebook page, where you can see information on upcoming videos and other interesting bushcraft and foraging posts.